Wynder, a cat-led sword and sorcery tale. Written by J.T. Williams. Copyright 2021. In memory of Moosh, our friend who was wild from the start and ultimately became the sweetest companion, we miss you. Chapter 1. Tavern Cat. I am quite the saviour of these helpless people. While they drink their frothy brews and smelly, stinging bottle water, I watch over them. When they fall to sleep, drooling on themselves and snoring the night away. That's when my true work begins. I'd be willing to wager a full 3 sardines that you've never met someone with my kind of skill, with my expertise. Especially when it comes to goblin infestations. You see, this is not quite the type of tavern you'd expect to find someone like me in. Sure, you have your ale-loving dwarves and a few dragon slayers from time to time. I've never seen an actual dragon, and I'm sure what that is. But it can't be any worse than what I deal with. Just the other day, there was a trio of elves that really set the dwarves to hollering, but they were off hunting some bloodsuckers or something, and I never saw them again. So, no one really stands ready to fight for the common people. As you can see, aside from our local fishers and their fresh catches of sweet sardines, true heroes are in short supply. Goblins are dastardly little creatures. They're too quick for dwarves, and elves really do not care to deal with them. They come at night, slipping across the ashy rafters high above where pipeweed has long stained any fresh wood colour from the sight of a normal eye. But I can see it, and I can see them. That is why I do what I do. I won't deny that I spend most of my time at the bar. The barkeep even calls me his, and I allow it. There really isn't anyone who doesn't claim me or feel the need to pat me on the head. They all know it. They all know I'm the reason they can sleep. But they don't know what lurks in the darkness. But I stand ready. I am Wynder, protector of the twin-tailed crab tavern, and the strongest cat in the... Are you talking to yourself again, Wynder? Wynder, an orange and black cat of no particular regard, was on his back, batting a small string. His friend Coral appeared in the open attic window of the tavern. She was as silver as the cloudy skies behind her, and her bright blue eyes were a welcome sight for him, even though he expected her to give him a hard time. Talking to myself? I'm preparing my speech so these people here will know what kind of warrior I am. Coral hissed, leaping down to the rafter. Right, a warrior, in a tavern. You were a stray until they started letting you stay in, just like the rest of us at the Rocky Cove. Somehow, though, I got kicked out of here, and that barkeep took a liking to you. NNDDD. You're not fully grown yet. You wouldn't last more than a second in a real fight. Wynder licked his paw, finishing off the remains of a crab from earlier. You're just jealous. You don't know what I do here, and you wouldn't understand. Coral rubbed her head against his. Understand? You're not talking about goblins again, are you? You know only the protectors can see those, and you're not worth their time. You can't even catch a ship mouse. Wynder stood up, making his way down the intertwined boards to the attic where the barkeep kept some of his dry goods. That mouse was not even alive! Those wizards were playing with their black magic and made an undead mouse. Coral hopped down to his level and swiped her tail towards him as she crossed his path. Not every man with a long beard is a wizard, and that mouse just ran through some smashed berries or something. I think this tavern life has made you soft. I caught 3 crabs today, and what have you caught? A cobweb? Wynder licked his paw and rubbed it over his ear. No, the master got me a fresh crab. No need to hunt, and I spend my nights hunting. Yes, for all those roblins you see. Goblins? What is a roblin? That just sounds fake. Coral turned and sat, staring at him. I just don't get why hunting goblins is so important to you. These bubble breaths that frequent this place are the smelliest of humans anyway, no matter the fact you have a good master. We are our own masters in the harbour. There are endless fish, and you can lay out beneath the stars and moon. Why would you want to be in here? She didn't understand. I didn't blame her. To protect them. To do something beyond just be a cat. The protectors aren't here, and there have been more and more goblins. I've even thought of going to the church to pray and get the protectors to come to our town. Coral bit at her leg, likely a flea, or maybe she had been hit by a goblin spell and didn't know it. They did have some nasty magic after all. She gnawed at herself a few more times and then scratched her head. Well, Wynder, she whipped her tail and stood up, stretching before walking back past me. I was going to ask you to come down to the round pipe. There are storm clouds coming, and when it rains, the pipe fills with water, and even a few random rats get trapped in the flow. But I know, goblins. At that time, another cat appeared in the window above. It was Ragfeet. I hate Ragfeet. Wynder, you dumb orange ball in here licking the casks? Ragfeet meowed. Or are you biting your own tail? Either way, Coral here knows a true tomcat. She's with me now. Didn't she tell you? Wynder hissed. Get out! You're not welcome here with us. Coral leapt up to the upper rafter, and then again to the window. You're going to have to stop chasing dream things eventually. Just be a cat. Be a harbour cat with me. It's better than being stuck in this tavern. And Ragfeet is telling the truth. We can still be friends, but beyond that, I need someone that isn't living in their head. Coral hopped out of the window and was gone. Wynder quivered. His body tensed, and he dug his claws into the wood. I'll show you both. Ragfeet can't just talk to me like that. I'm not just a orange ball. He heard the master down below. The tavern would soon start filling up as the local miners finished their day's work, and the fishers came in from the eastern seas. He made his way down into the tavern and nuzzled the master, who was tending to a new keg of ale. Oh, Wynder, where have you been? Chasing those rats that were getting into the grain? They made quite the mess last night. If only it were so simple. That wasn't rats. That was goblins. Meow. Wynder rubbed up against the master. We have a clan coming from Mandorlaku, quite the scary ones. If they spend much time here, I suggest you hide. I haven't heard the greatest things about them. Those ascenders want to get money for that new emperor. A bar patron gulped as he finished his mug. I won't have it. The master chuckled. Well, you may have been a warrior at one time, but you aren't as young as you were. No matter, I hear they are spreading something strange, the blood, making our shrines to the shadow gods run bloody red like when you split open a neck of a... The master's people were always quite boisterous, and they really got going if there was some good music playing and a few new barrels of dwarven ale. Though Wynder wasn't sure what the difference was of this elvish wine or this dwarven ale, it all tasted bad to him. Though there was a farmer that would come in from outside of town that occasionally brought him fresh milk, it had been a while since that had happened. Now, with nightfall upon them, Wynder prepared to keep his careful watch. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 2. Night Encounter. The night went on, and Wynder began his typical rounds. His master was busy serving the many patrons around the tavern, and more people were stacking into the seating area than he had seen in some time. There were quite a few more arguments that Wynder was used to, and though he attempted to nuzzle his head to many of the unhappy patrons, he soon realized that there was nothing he could do to quell their anger. "I'll be dead before I swear any fealty to blood gods," one said. Several dwarves abruptly stood and pointed at the man who had just spoken. "You won't see much of us here if they come." Wynder's master came from behind the bar and put his finger to his mouth, beckoning the others to be quiet. "You can't talk like this. They'll come here and shut me down." "And better they do, Master of the Ales," a burly dwarf said. "Better that than what I've heard they can do. I think we head back home for a time. The mine here isn't worth the risk." Now, my master began, "don't go making rash decisions. You dwarves are who cleared out the trolls, made many of the very patrons here quite happy when you did so. Many of them wouldn't go there with the monsters." "Monsters?" Wynder thought. "Are they talking about goblins?" "I know, but there will be more to come. Perhaps a few sellswords can offer their protection, but me and my kin have already risked much here, and I won't stand to see us converted, as I understand those ascenders call it." The dwarves left, much to the dismay of the master. As he went back behind the bar, Wynder jumped up to check on him. He would always smile when Wynder would give him attention, but he seemed quite a bit sadder than usual to the tavern cat. Wynder meowed, rubbing his head against his master's hand. "I know you can't really speak my language, but I will take care of those monsters. I've been trying, but I will keep at it." A few more patrons entered from behind him, and the master put him down on the floor. Wynder hurried to get to a better spot, jumping up onto the casks and pulling himself into the rafters. From here, he could patrol above those in the tavern, keeping watch, and hopefully finally catching a few of the goblins. Tonight, after the dwarves leaving and upsetting the master, he knew he had to. He would do it this time. He would make a difference. As the night dragged on and a cool wind began to blow through the rafters, the tavern became quite quiet. While the master kept a fire going in the corner of the tavern, several hooded figures came in and refused drinks, instead choosing to sit by the fire. Wynder jumped down to the bar again to find many of his familiar faces of this hour missing. The master had made his way back to the bar and was polishing a mug as Wynder jumped down to the wooden floor, running over to the newcomers. One of them was a wood elf, evident from his pointed ears and longbow he had sitting on his lap. "They will be coming from the mountains, with 300 more expected by midnight." 300? The man talking reached down, scratching Wynder's head. "I've told the city guard to stay in," the other man said. "They're not built for this kind of magic usage, and they'll get in the way of the guild's advance. The vampires are fast, faster than what we're used to out in the wilds." We have seen the same. Their command of magic is quite unexpected. Vampires? Goblin vampires! Wynder jumped into the elf's lap. The elf stroked him from head to tail, making a point scratch just behind his ear. Right there. Good. We must all be ready, the elf continued. Once we start this, we have to keep it up. Any survivors can open a rift and draw more in. We can't have that. More goblins? Eliadel fell a fortnight ago. There are whispers of an old soul who has returned, a force against the great seer. Keep not faith in whispers, the elf warned. The door of the tavern opened, and Wynder smelt a stench, a putrid smell. Not of fish, or of goblin, or even of some stinky dwarf that hadn't bathed in many moons. Worse. A dog. Wynder hissed as the elf holding him reached at his side, grasping the hilt of his sword. Long since we've seen a pale elf here, the elf said to a new stranger in the tavern. Wynder looked for the dog, but instead of some random bone-gnawing dimwit, he saw what looked like a wolf with seemingly glowing red fur. Not all whispers require faith, this new stranger said. We are set up across the city. Wynder locked eyes with the dog, but it seemed uninterested in him. Then it seems there isn't much more to do, the elf said, patting Wynder on the head. The stranger with the dog departed. The elf set him back on the floor, and the two of them stood, embracing one another. The elf flipped a coin to the master and headed out the door, a cold wind blowing in as the door slammed shut. They said to be ready. I am ready for whatever happens. Wynder meowed as the master began sweeping the floor. Be sure to stay in tonight, the master said. You don't want to be out there. Wynder jumped up to one of the tables, moving to attract his master's hand, but he just continued sweeping. Wynder could sense the distance, the sadness, and perhaps even hopelessness in his master. He was worried about those goblins, and that would not do. The master continued cleaning, and Wynder watched from the bar, seeing that 2 or 3 patrons had passed out, and realizing that tonight would be a lighter night for him. 3 nights ago, there were over a dozen. As was typical, the master covered each of them with cowskin and capped all the candles save a single one he left on the bar top, a fortune of good luck for the day ahead. Wynder curled up beside it as the master went on to his own room to lay down for the night. As soon as the door shut across the tavern, Wynder popped up looking around. The men on the floor were snoring quite loudly. It was that which would mask the sounds of the goblin's approach. Wynder sniffed at the air and realized that the wind outside had died down. Where he could normally smell that of fish and crab brought in at sunset by the fishers, a few random pieces awaiting finding by a coral and other cats, he didn't smell that at all. It was different. This night would be one unlike any before, and while Wynder was ready, his greatest test was ahead. He jumped up towards the rafters, making a careful approach to a place where one of the support beams for the tavern went up through the roof. It was here he could keep watch. The goblins liked to come from the window back behind him, but there were breaks in the sides of the roof where they could sneak in if they wanted. Goblins were excellent climbers, and their dark colour made them difficult to see. Wynder knew they'd move down to the floor. It was there they could snatch the gold from the patrons, or even a piece of jewelry or two if they had it. Wynder had tried to explain to them what happened in the next morning, but they always assumed a random thief had robbed them, or that they had spent too much on ale. They would never believe the truth. Wynder was vigilant, watching, waiting as he always did, but with a particular zeal tonight. That and Elfin Man had been talking about more goblins coming, and he was ready. But no one had come yet, not one single goblin. The hours went on, and Wynder waited, tail batting at the thought of the chase and the bite. I hate they taste so disgusting. Unlike a mouse or a fish, goblins are horrid eating. Their flesh is putrid, like a strange mushroom with maggoty bread. Not to mention that you bite them, you're tearing the meat from the good parts and trying to avoid their daggers and spears. If only they didn't wear the thick armour on their upper chest and neck. Without that, the kill would be much easier. There was movement below. Somehow, something had gotten in without Wynder realising it. He jumped down atop the casks and to the bar top, watching over the passed-out patrons. Something jumped behind him, and the candle was knocked over, rolling into a wet spot on the floor as something ran through the wine bottles, scurrying into a dark corner. Wynder hissed, growling into the darkness. Goblins never did this. Wynder hugged the ground, his claws out and digging into the wood floor. His tail was set behind him, the perfect setup for an explosive pounce. "Cat, stop!" a voice begged from the darkness. It was a shrill, raspy voice. "You have invaded the master's tavern. I will not stop, goblin. If you will not stop, then perhaps you will pause a moment to listen to me." Wynder kept his stance, staring down this tiny goblin who was quivering at the sight of him. But goblins rarely were alone, yet this one was. They also didn't run and hide in the small places beneath the bar. This goblin was up to something. Wynder was sure of it. "Speak, goblin! There are dark things moving outside. There is something evil." "You're evil. You're vile. I ought to rip you apart." Wynder snapped at him, and the goblin drew a small, curved dagger. "Stop, cat! You don't understand. I am but one, but there are many others. We're leaving the town. There are vampires from far away. They bring a new magic. They have made blood bubble up from the streets." Wynder hissed again. "You lie! You are just making up stories." "I have no reason to make up stories. Let me live, please. I just want to get to the waterway. We are leaving, but I can tell you something. My kin are taking your kind. They have already raided the upper barrows outside of town. The kittens! They are headed to sea and are taking snacks for their trip. I'm not part of that group, but you can keep cornering a lone goblin or warn your friends by the harbour. You pick, cat." He couldn't trust this goblin. He just couldn't. There was no reason the goblins would act so rashly in his mind. Leave the town. That just doesn't make sense. Why would the goblins leave? Wynder heard something outside. There was a series of shouts and flashes of fire in the darkness. Wynder looked down at the goblin, and then thought of Coral. He backed away from the goblin. "Go, flee. If I see you again in this tavern, you're dead." The goblin sheathed his dagger. "You have a friend in goblin kind. I will remember this as you will remember me. Goblins are not loyal to one another unless mercy has been shown. You have shown mercy, and as such, I can call you friend. Chapter 3. The Fight. Wynder didn't have time for small talk. He jumped up to the bar top and then to the casks before making the final leap to the rafters. He moved across and to the window, looking out at the street below. Hooded figures moved through the streets, and at this hour there were quite a bit more than he'd expect. He leaped down to the awning of the building, and then down to the ground, moving with haste across the street and down the dirt road to the harbour district. There was a strange smell in the air. Smoke rose in the city around him as more shouts and screams echoed through the city. He kept his focus, running towards the great pipe near the harbour, the exact spot where Coral said she'd be. It was beginning to rain, so she'd definitely be there still. Thankfully to Wynder, the harbour and the great pipe weren't far away. There were large rocks laid across the shoreline, shelter for the town in the case of one of the howling storms that came off the ocean. It was here the many pipes from the city emptied out and was a form of paradise for Wynder's kind. He jumped down to one of the pools, but realised there was no one here. Wynder sniffed the air, looking around in the darkness and not seeing goblins or even another cat. He jumped across the pool and up the rocks on the other side, feeling something gooey on his paw. Stopping, he sniffed it. Blood! He darted up to the road and began calling for other cats, meowing louder and louder. They can't be all gone. He heard another cat. It was very soft, though, weak. He listened for where it was coming from. It's not too far. Wynder shot towards the cries, running as quick as his paws would move him. He saw another cat ahead, but this one didn't smell familiar. He approached carefully. The cat was on its side and laying in a way cats just didn't normally lay. Wynder crept, careful to not get too close too fast. This cat was one of the largest he had ever seen. Go on, young one, get out of here, hide. The cat moaned. Wynder hurried to this cat's side, seeing that his head had a massive gash and he was missing an eye. Stop staring at me, that's old. Lost it to a spider, but the leg, that's new. Wynder noticed this cat had multiple large gashes across his hind legs, and though his fur was black and white, what white he did have on his body was stained red. Come on, Wynder said. The protectors hear all prayers at the church. If goblins have done this, we will be safe there. The cat smacked Wynder with his paw and then collapsed back down. I am a protector. The guild is all over the town trying to stop the goblins, but the human and elves are waging a rebellion against something much darker. It has complicated things. Get out of here, kitten, or you'll end up like me. Wynder looked around them. I am looking for my friends, cats that were by the harbour. I saw 'em, they were taken. You'd be good to stay far from them goblins. You're untrained and they'll be back. They're letting their poisons wear me down. They're smarter than we give them credit for. Where are they? Wynder asked. The cat set up as best as he could. His body quivered, the poison causing his muscles to twitch, further incapacitating him. Ready to die or something? Ready to live. I'm no mere tavern cat. The protectors stared at him for a moment before laying back down. Down the centre pipe there, they pulled the cats into that. Their spears are tipped with a much stronger poison than normal. The guild thought the harbour was safe, and that the goblins would flee into the woods to the west, but we were wrong. I'll be back to get you help, Wynder said. Just stay here. The protector laughed and flicked his tail. I'm not going anywhere, but do yourself a favour and not worry of me. If you can get to your friends, do it and hide. Wynder hurried towards the great pipe. While great for what came out during rainstorms, it was not a place many cats went because there was always a chance of worse things than goblins lurking in the darkness. But Wynder would not be dissuaded. He came to the pipe. It was many times taller than he was, with a steady stream of stench coming from the darkness ahead. He began running down a stone pathway that ran alongside the stream. In the darkness of the tunnel, with little light from the outside world, his vision became clearer. But it wasn't what he could see that caused his heart to beat faster in his chest, or his muscles to tense, and his claws to grip into the stone, pulling him faster. He heard other cats. He swore he heard Coral crying. I've got to be fast. He was running now. But he was unsure of what he'd do when he got there. He had fought 5 goblins at one time, but that was in a place he knew well. His surroundings were a maze of broken bricks, timber supports, and pipes with random gashes in them. He began to see spots where he could look up and see the outside world, but he didn't stay there long enough to take it in. His intent was the unknown ahead. As he continued, he thought of what Ragfeet had said. I'm not a dumb orange ball, and I'm about to show all of them. The truth was that his ability to see goblins so easily wasn't seen as a gift from the other cats. He couldn't be normal as they saw it, and no one believed him anyway. His life in the tavern was a necessity. Wynder wasn't the largest of cats, or the strongest, but he embraced the gift he did have. Now, the words of others didn't matter, only his choice to act now, be it for good or ill. Wynder had made it to an opening in the great pipe to a vast subterranean cavern. Here there were dozens of goblins. He began forward, but then spotted many cats. Several had already been killed, and the goblins were hard at work, cutting them into pieces. They had constructed barges, kept secure with a few ropes, and ready to move down an even larger pipe with a fast-moving current. The cries of his fellow cats and kittens were long and loud, echoing off the cavern wall. There are so many goblins. He imagined how horrifying it must be for his kin, unable to see what grabbed them. He had to find Coral, and he had to help as many of them as he could. He went to pounce upon one of the goblins when he was stricken with a fear unlike any he had ever felt. He could run, he could flee right now and do as the protector had told him. I am not a protector. I'm a mere tavern cat. I can't. No, I will. I will be a protector to these cats and kittens. They need me. This is who I am to be. No one will ever laugh at me again after this. Wynder leaped from the high rocky cliff, landing upon the goblins and slashing them with his claws. He spun about, sending goblins flying in every direction, as he was lucky that they did not have their typical armor on. He bit at one of their heads, tearing through his flesh and pulling it apart. He felt a sting in his tail and spun, slashing another goblin and knocking its spear away. "Wynder!" a voice cried out. It was Coral, bound with many others in a cage of bones, and on the second barge in a line of 3. Wynder ran for the cage when a large, burly goblin with fluffy curled eyebrows grabbed him by the whiskers. He went to bite the goblin, and 3 more goblins climbed on top of him. "Release the barges! Get moving down the river!" a goblin ordered. The goblins begun cutting the lines, and Wynder rolled across the ground, kicking and pushing at the goblins upon him. He slashed down the face of the one with the fluffy eyebrows, sending him staggering back. There was another stab in his tail, and then one in his rib. He could feel that the second one was poisoned, but it was just a grazing hit. The barges were moving down the river, but the third one was a bit slower. It was the one with the kittens, and in one leap he was upon it. The goblins here had thought they were safe. They were wrong. Wynder hissed, slashing at them one after another and biting open the cage with the kittens. While the current was dangerous, they were moving into a vastly more open area beneath the ground. It was a cave system, and at the very least, the kittens could get away from the river. The kittens were nuzzling him, and he patted the calico and black kittens before directing them way. "Jump, my friends! Keep running away from this place." The kittens did so, each of them jumping as the moment was right as Wynder turned to the other 2 barges. He hated water, absolutely hated it. The mere thought of what he needed to was repulsive, but he couldn't make the jump all the way to the second barge. Wynder plunged into the icy depths as lightning flashed into the river from the outside world. The ground rumbled around him as he paddled his way forward, pulling himself onto the barge where Coral was captured. The other cats began shouting as the goblins ran at him. He slashed one, but 2 more stabbed him in the neck. He coughed, blood running down his fur as he rolled in a fury of claws and teeth, clearing the deck of the barge and making his way to the cage. "Wynder! Wynder! You did it!" Coral said. "Good work," Ragfeet said. "Get us out, and I will catch you ever fish you need. Tell us what you need, and we will help. I never doubted you." "Yes, you did," Wynder said. His vision was getting fuzzy. Those last 2 spears had poison, and his gamble of a move to clear the barge had meant he got a serious dose from their wretched spears. This cage had a lock on it. He couldn't bite through this one as he had done with the one that contained the kittens. He stumbled forward, seeing a silver latch on a strange wooden column. That had to be it. There had to be a lever to unlock it. That's how goblin locks worked, or so he knew it, as went the stories he had heard as a kitten. He began fumbling forward as spears whizzed by him. He pushed the silver latch, and the lock on the cage opened. He collapsed. Staring ahead of him, he saw the horror of that cat that had already been killed. Their flesh stacked in piles, coarse salt coating them as the goblins were preparing to preserve them. He had gotten to his fellow cats just in time. Coral licked him, but he couldn't stand up even though he was trying. "He's been poisoned," she said. He felt a cat grip him by the neck. "Let's go," another said. "There is a split in the river ahead. We're in the river passage beneath the city. I've been here." The final barge kept moving well ahead of them. There weren't any cats on there, but they could not have caught up with them if they wanted to. He tried to speak, but couldn't. His fellow cats jumped from the barge onto the rocks where the river diverted, and he was carried with haste down a pathway. "Is that all of us?" Coral asked. Wynder felt the grip on his neck lessen, and he coughed several times. "I think so," he said, forcing himself to stand up on all four legs. He didn't feel as bad as he did before, but he was far from perfect. "The kittens made it off, but we need to make sure they get to safety." "The protectors are here," Ragfeet said. "We saw one at the harbour. Where are the others?" "Not here," Wynder said. "We are on our own, but I can see the goblins. I told you I could." He began to step forward even as more blood seeped from his wounds. "We must get back to the harbour and hide. We must help the protector there." Wynder began forward. "I know the way," Ragfeet said. As Wynder, Ragfeet and Coral pushed forward with a host of random cats, Wynder's body fought the poison. With each paw fall, he could feel the vibrations through his legs up to his spine. From his tail to his neck, he felt warmer than usual, and his heart was racing more than it should have been. They came to a series of stones that led up to the outside world, and the group of them made their way up. They were on a bridge. The harbour was only a few buildings back east, but the city burned. Flames rippled through the buildings above them. "What has happened?" Coral asked. That goblin was right. There was something bigger going on. Wynder growled, looking around as his fellow cats seemed to be distraught. "We have to get to Rocky Cove. We have to get to the harbour. We can't stop here." Suddenly, blasts of fire struck all around them. Several of the cats with them fled into the streets around them. Others lay dead, scorched by the fireballs. Pieces of fur and smoke floated in front of Wynder. Coral and Ragfeet both backed against the bridge. There was a sudden bolt of lightning that bounced through the buildings around them, crashing debris all over the road, sending Ragfeet and Coral darting across to the other side of the bridge. A horse was fast approaching. The rattling of its hooves sent shockwaves over the bridge. "Wynder, come on! This way!" Coral cried. Wynder began to feel sick. The feeling before of warmness, now a debilitating pain that made it difficult to move. The horse thundered across the bridge. Wynder heard barking, and just behind the horse was the dog from before in the tavern. But instead of glowing red fur, flames rippled down his back. But he wasn't on fire. This dog was different than the typical flea bags. Wynder watched as the dog propelled himself into the rider, dragging it from the horse. The dog snarled, biting the person over and over before a blast of ice blew the dog backward with a whelping cry. The man stood, the flames of the town accenting the glistening sweat and blood rolling down the man's face. "The time of reckoning draws nigh, and you will all—" The man's words were cut short as another figure flew upon him with fiery daggers, thrusting the blades into his upper torso. "You will be silent," the second figure shouted. The dismounted figure slumped to the ground and collapsed. Wynder struggled to get across the street as now other figures were making their way to the bridge. They were holding wooden sticks with bright lights on the top of them. "Purge the darkness," one of them said. Wynder was nearly stepped on as the figures bathed the bridge in bright white light. He felt his body become light, and quite strangely a tingle. H felt the poison flee his body, and he was renewed. "Light of the goddess, purge all," a voice said. He looked up to see a woman in silver robes reach down. "Even the smallest are safe this night." She scratched him just under his neck, and he purred, moving up against her legs. Thank you, stranger. Wynder didn't know what had happened or how. The lights from the staffs lessened, and the figure with the red blades sheathed them. Send word to Evern, this ascender is dead. He then tapped his leg, and the dog from before ran up to Wynder. The dog looked down to him. Not bad, cat. I could smell the poison on you before. Wynder sit up proudly. I'm not sure what you are, but good work. Yourself? He wasn't really sure what to say. We all have secrets. We're all different. That's exactly what makes us unique. There are more of your kind nearby. Take shelter until the fires are out. The figure with the red blades whistled. Come on, Nonro, leave that cat alone. Chapter 4. Protector. Wynder walked over to Coral and Ragfeet. Both of them stared at him with wide eyes. They circled around him, sniffing his fur. What happened? Wynder licked his coat. I don't know, but it worked. It was something those warriors did. Do you think they're here because of the goblins? Ragfeet asked. Wynder flicked his tail. I think we both had our battles, and we just all happened to meet up. Their concerns aren't ours. We need to get back to the shore. That protector is still there. They made their way with haste, zipping between burning buildings and the cries of people as whatever threat was here before had left a trail of destruction. They came soon to the harbour, and Wynder hurried to the spot he had left the protector. He was gone. Wynder, you shouldn't worry about it, Coral said. He likely left, went off to find more goblins. There were goblin bodies all around the area. These weren't here before. There were no bodies here, Wynder meowed sadly. They came back. They killed him. A goblin appeared from behind a nearby rock. Wynder hissed, running towards the creature who lifted up his spear. Wait, you remember right? Tavern cat? He said, dropping his weapon. Tavern goblin is here. Both Coral and Ragfeet ran up beside Wynder. Where are they? Tell us. We can help, Coral said. It's okay, Wynder said. He turned his attention back to the goblin. What do you want? Come. Wynder followed the goblin around the rock to a large pile of oyster shells. Here, there were many more goblins. After the tavern, I decided to see if I could find a boat to hide on, but then all the fire and spells flying around the town scared us to take cover. A few minutes ago, those goblins that took the kittens came to take him. They were quite angry and said that a random orange cat had ruined everything. I owed you one. I told you that you made a friend. So we helped him. They pulled several oyster shells off the mound and revealed the protector. Wynder sniffed him. The cat opened his eyes. Yes, I am alive. I smell like oysters now, but these goblins for some reason decided I was worth saving. Wynder, Coral said, her voice trembling. Wynder looked up to see over a dozen massive silver and black cats. These all had emblems on their necks with a silver star and a strange bolt. One of them, a large white female, stepped forward. Moosh, are you okay over there? He's been poisoned, Wynder said. The cat ran over to the pile of oysters and the protector beneath. He's a protector, Wynder said. He tried to help my friends and me. He has been poisoned. We need to get him to the elven fountains. Good protector, the goblin said. We did what we could to protect him. We do not want any trouble. Why would you help our kind? She asked the goblin. He pointed at Wynder. That one spared me, seemed right to help. She looked to Wynder. You can see the goblins? I can. But you were not born in elven lands. No, but my mother came to this town from another place. I don't know where. I'm just a tavern cat. I live at the Twin-Tailed Crab Tavern just down the road. The cat's whispers twitched. The protectors thank you, Wynder. I have heard about deeds this night from a group of kittens that say an orange cat saved them from certain death. I will assume that was you. Thank you, Wynder. The protectors departed, leaving Wynder, Coral and Ragfeet beside the shoreline. The sun was coming up, and Wynder hurried to get back to the tavern, leaving his friends for now, but he'd be sure to check back up on them soon. He had to make sure the master was okay. To his surprise, the tavern was untouched, but the building around the tavern had quite a lot of damage. He made his way, carefully, moving through broken timbers and making a massive leap onto the awning that led to the window in the attic. He made his way inside and looked down to see the master sitting at the bar holding his head. Meow. The master jumped up from his seat, looking at Wynder as the cat made his way down from the attic to the bar top. I had thought the worse. Where have you been? Wynder nuzzled his master and purred. Protecting you and everyone else. Just what I'm supposed to do. In the coming weeks, the goblins stopped attacking the tavern and robbing the patrons after a bit of discussion between the goblin he discovered was named Muncher and himself. There was actually another tavern outside of the town that was trying to take the business of the master's tavern, and the goblins were happy to ransack the place on a nightly basis. Much to Wynder's surprise, he was actually able to sleep a bit more at night. While there were many changes in the town itself, and talk of more battles in distant lands, the patrons returned to the tavern, and things slowly returned to normal. Wynder found out that Coral had no real intentions with Ragfeet, and in fact, Ragfeet had no desire to do anything but eat oysters and ignore any more hints of grand adventures. The events of the night had left him unable to care about anything except simply his next meal, and he was becoming a true fat cat, rumoured to be spending the night at the harbour master's house. Coral was eventually allowed into the tavern at night time, and they spent many nights watching the moon from the attic window. It was on one of these such nights he was waiting for Coral when he looked up to the window to see a large black cat. "Who are you?" he shouted. "Oh, just a cat you met once, a few weeks ago. No big deal, really." "A protector? Here? You survived." "It was Moosh." "Yes, I always do. That's not my first bout with poison." He began to clean himself. Why are you here?" True goblin sight is a rare gift for cats. Most with cats never know what it is they are chasing across their bedchambers or across the other rooms of their abodes. Sometimes regular cats just see a small shape and chase it. But you were born in elven lands. You have goblin sight. The guild will be training you, if you accept it, to guard the humans of this town if ever the need arises again. Wynder couldn't believe what he was being told. Him? A protector? There are worse evils than goblins. There is talk of darker things, and we must rise to protect the humans, elves and dwarves from what they can't see. Will you take up the charge of a protector?" Wynder meowed happily. "I will! Author's note." All right, if you've read any of my work, you know this is a different one. If you couldn't tell, this is set during the Rogue Elf series, and even has a cameo from none other than Keelan and his fire doggo Nonro. The cats Wynder, Coral and Moosh are our family cats, and I figured this was a fun way to bring them into the Dwemhar realms. Originally, this story was published as part of a charity anthology, but has since been republished as a standalone tale. If the world intrigues you and you want to know more, I invited you to check out the Rogue Elf series. There is a high probability that Wynder himself will show back up in Book 10. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Additional note added July 19th, 2021. On July 18th, 2021, we discovered that Moosh, one of our cats, had suddenly passed away. The dedication in this book was for him. Perhaps now I have even more of a reason to continue these stories following the Protectors.